Welcome to Frankie Ogar Television, where storytelling meets cinematic excellence.
Welcome back to Consumer Voice Television. My name is Reward Enakerapo. This week we'll be talking about consumer laws, their rights and privileges. Because if you don't know your rights, you don't know how to go about protecting them and what to do to preserve them. To this end, Dorcom Rimdam went to the FCCPC to talk to the Director Legal Services to understand all things concerning consumer rights, privileges, and protection. Here is how that enlightening conversation went.
For a conversation about the legal framework right here at the FCCPC is the Director, Legal Services, Tam Tamunokumbia. Good to have you here, sir.
My pleasure being with you.
Can you please provide an overview of the legal framework that empowers the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission in Nigeria?
Well, talking about an overview of the legal framework, you will first of all talk about the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act 2018. That is the law that establishes the FCCPC. But the background to that is also that Section 16 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, that section requires that the National Assembly should set up a body which would, in essence, provide the things that the Consumer Protection Commission is doing now. So there is a statutory flavor to it, constitutional flavor, if you like. And so the law I've just cited, that is the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission Act, the law was set up in 2018. And since then, it's made provisions for what did not exist in Nigeria. For instance, for the first time, we have a codified law relating to consumer protection and competition in Nigeria. Before now, you have pieces of consumer protection laws here and there in different laws, but today we have the whole body regulating consumer protection and competition in Nigeria. Of course, that law, as against the Consumer Protection Council Act, which had operated before, you find that that Consumer Protection Council Act was abolished, and this new law came into being. There are different aspects of this law which are new. For instance, you will not have had consumer protection rights before now, but today in this act you find that the consumer protection rights are embedded. You will also find that there is a tribunal that is set up for the first time called the Competition and Consumer Protection Tribunal. That tribunal has already taken off consumers who disagree with decisions of the Consumer Protection Commission or other agencies can go before that tribunal. So those are major issues that have come up before that. And then, of course, the provisions are wider. We have about 17, sections, subsections alone in Section 17, which provides for the functions of the Commission. And, of course, Section 18, which provides for the powers of the Commission. So it's a wide range of provisions that you have in the FCCPA 2018.
What specific legal powers does the Commission have in enforcing consumer protection laws and ensuring fair competition in the marketplace?
Well, first I will say Section 17E, for instance, provides for investigative powers. The Commission now has investigative powers, and then you go to Section 32 and 33, it provides for the powers of requesting information. If we invite a company, we invite a respondent to appear before us and he fails to do so, there is now a provision in the law that criminalizes that action. When they fail to appear before us, we now have the powers to prosecute them just for non-appearance or disobedience to summons, as we call it. So there is, now wide powers that the Commission has to enforce, its provisions as against what it used to be before. Apart from the fact of summoning or asking for information or for documents, the Commission carries out investigations, as I have said. Now, during those investigations, it could be a dawn raid, and once we find some things that are contrary or that violate the provisions of the law, we will also prosecute. So a major dimension of this law is the fact that the Commission itself can prosecute. We do not have to go to the Attorney General's office unless we choose to do so. The law says the Commission may prosecute or go to the office of the Attorney General. So it makes things easier, it makes things faster. And where there are even emergency situations, now there are issues of warrants. Warrants are provided for under Section 27 and 28 of the Act. But what that means is that when we find some violations or we believe that there is some violation against the law, we can go to a federal high court and ask for a warrant to go and search, remove items, or arrest people, do whatever the circumstance provide. And with that, of course, we have succeeded in many cases and many of our investigations that we have carried out.
Can you highlight key Nigerian consumer protection laws that the Commission enforces and how these laws aim to safeguard the rights of consumers?
Well, first of all, I will start from the point of Section 17A of our law. That's the first function the law gives to us, and that is that the Commission can enforce all laws relating to consumer protection and competition in Nigeria. And so we do not only enforce the FCCPA, that's the law regulating this commission, but we also enforce any other law, as long as it has elements of competition or consumer protection. So when you ask me about such laws, for instance, I will talk about the NCC. The Nigerian Communications Commission has its own law. But in their law, you will find that they even have sections on consumer protection. Now, generally, they are sector regulators for that particular sector. But where consumers are not satisfied, they can go to the sector regulator, and thereafter they could also come to us. So in that sense, the FCCPC is like a regulator's regulator. So we can, and we have the powers under that section I quoted, to enforce the laws of NCC FCCPA. We have even the aviation sector, we can enforce their law. NAFDAC, we can enforce their laws. You name it. Yeah. Well, we've had some that you may not want to mention the names, but there is generally a generator, situation, because that matter is still in court. Well, it was a very successful operation. There is, of course, currently what's still going on. We've done that operation, and that has to do with the loan sharks. We call them loan sharks cases. They are financial institutions that defame people for non-payment of their loans and all that. We have said that that's a digital provision that they should not have really gone the way they have done it. Loans of banks are entitled to recovering their loans, but not the way they are doing it. And because of that, we have had a downgrade against some of them. And as at today, most of them have complied. And now you have a situation where you must register with the commission before you delve into that kind of business. A few of them that have not, we have shut down their apps. The point we should make, and we should let Nigerians know, is that the provisions of the FCCPA cover all goods and services. We do not really have restrictions, when it comes to consumer protection or competition. And that's why we are like, the regulators regulate.
How does the Commission ensure that businesses comply with consumer protection laws, and what mechanisms are in place for enforcement?
Well, businesses, first of all, as a commission, it is our expectations that business will thrive. So with all the powers we have to enforce, the rules and the law, we ensure that, closure of businesses is like, a last resort. We do not resort to, such powers always. So first, there is the education. In fact, our consumer education is now called, Consumer and Business Education Department, because we have to educate businesses as well. Businesses should come. In our law, for instance, there's a whole chapter that is set aside for duties of manufacturers, duties of retailers, duties of sellers. They must comply with those duties that are set out in the law. But like I said, educating them is part of what we do to ensure that we're not just carrying the stick. When we use the stick, we have also offered the carrot. Is such a situation. We educate them, we enlighten the public, very well.
Welcome to Frankie Ogar Television, where storytelling meets cinematic excellence. Subscribe now and step up behind the scenes of Africa's next great stories. Let's make magic together.
In context of consumer complaints, how does the Commission conduct investigations and mediations to resolve disputes between consumers and business owners?
You mean the channels?
Yeah.
First of all, the businesses themselves, many a times we have programs, to enlighten and educate them. Then you have NGOs. In fact, some consumer NGOs register with us, and they also assist in the education of consumers, about their rights and the businesses themselves. So those are means. You have for instance, the Nigerian Bar Association has had a collaboration with us in most cases in some of their conferences, and some of them, we have sections where we educate consumers, where we educate businesses as well, as such fora. But the enlightenment process is really very wide. For instance, we've had to discuss with judges themselves and to enlighten them about the new, and of course the judges have the law, as we say, in their chest, but they need to know what is going on, in society in interpreting the law. So we've done a lot in educating businesses as well as consumers, in understanding our law.
What legal recourse is available for consumers who feel like their rights have been violated? And how does the Commission assist to redress such issues?
Well, when consumers complain to the FCCPC, one of the first things we do is to send a notice to the respondent, that is the company or the businesses they are complaining against. And once that notice goes out, we expect them to respond to us and say their part. Now, where the matter is easy to resolve based on the letters, based on the responses they've made to us, it is resolved at that stage. But where it is not, there is a mediation. The department that handles that is Surveillance and Investigation Department. At that stage, will invite both parties for a mediation. And usually at that mediation, if the parties agree, then they will go into an agreement. But if they do not agree, then the Commission will make an order. Usually our orders are binding on all parties, but parties can also go to court when we make an order, or they can go to the tribunal when we make an order that they do not agree with. But generally, that's the process we follow. We first inform the other party. The rules must be followed, that all parties must be heard. In law, we say namo dat non quod habet, every party must be heard. So we follow that process. And then, like I said, where it's not resolved at that stage, it goes into mediation. At mediation, we expect that parties will come to terms and agree. If they do not, then we proceed to make an order against any of the parties that we consider has violated the particular situation in case.
Have there been instances where business owners report consumers?
Business owners reporting consumers, it's not common. And I will say why it's not common is that this is a consumer protection agency. It's not necessarily a business protection agency. So businesses do not, they can go to court, yes, but coming here is not necessarily common. But if a situation arises where after a consumer has complained and in going into the matter, we find that the businesses are right, we will say it as it is. It's not every case that consumers bring to us that go in favor of the consumers.
In context of consumer complaints, how does the Commission resolve disputes between consumers and business owners?
First of all, our law provides that when there is a violation of your right, you go to the businesses, you go to the companies that have violated the rights, complain to them. And if it is resolved at that stage, fair and fine. But if it is not resolved, you can then take it up to the sector regulator, because there are, like I said, we're also involved in all goods and services, but we recognize that there are sector regulators. So if the issue, for instance, has to do with a telephone situation, you will go and complain to NCC. If it has to do with aviation, you go and complain to NCA, and so on. Now, if it is not resolved, you still have a channel to complain to the FCCPC. even after going to the businesses and sector regulators who will still handle it and look into your case. But the consumer is not left just with the FCCPC. He can still go to court. His rights are not curtailed just because he has complained to either the businesses, the sector regulators, or the FCCPC itself. He can still go to court and enforce his consumer rights. And by the way, I had mentioned in my opening statements that this law, the FCCPA, recognizes so much of the rights of the consumer that you now have a whole section, not section, a whole part of the law, dedicated to the rights of consumer. All those rights are embedded. And by the way, I will always mention this in passing, that when you buy products, over time Nigerian sellers, businesses will tell you that you cannot return that goods if it is defective. But today, the FCCPA has taken care of that. You can return defective goods, to where you bought it. And where they refuse to collect it, the FCCPC is there to give, a shoulder to that.
Can you speak on how the Commission collaborates with other organizations or bodies in order to ensure consumer protection rights are upheld and to strengthen its legal system in general?
Collaboration is something that is uppermost in our law and in our operations, because we believe that the market is so wide that no single agency can really completely come to the aid of the consumer. I can tell you, for instance, that none of us, either the FCCPC, the NAFDAC, SON, NCC, none of us has a staff strength of about 5,000 staff. We do not. So unless we collaborate, we are talking about 200 and something million Nigerians that we are supposed to be, bringing succor to as consumers. Every citizen is a consumer. So we must collaborate as agencies to assist the consumer in enforcing his rights. And for us, the law in particular, section 104, 105, 106, talk about a situation where we should have MOUs. Over time, we've had what we call, tough fight. Everybody will say, I'm the person in charge of this area, every agency. For instance, if you want an airline to come to FCC, why have you delayed the flights against consumers? Why have you cancelled flights and all that? In the past, you will hear the aviation sector regulators say, this is a field, you cannot investigate that. You understand? So the law now requires that we have an MOU. In areas of conflict, in areas where we all think we have powers, how do we go about, this regulation? So this brings about cooperation between or among agencies, as at today. And we've had so many of these MOUs already executed between or among agencies, and by the grace of God, you rarely will hear now about this fight for turf or fight for mandate. It's not common again. And what the FCCPC has done is to take this issue of signing MOUs and agreements to the doorsteps of the other regulators. I have said we are sector regulators, and if you go through our law gives the FCCP a supremacy over other agencies, but we don't flaunt it. We must make sure we go to agencies that have not come to us to sign an agreement for cooperation, for collaboration. we take it upon ourselves to do, the visit and to, set up or initiate the processes.
For signing MOUs, and we've succeeded in many cases in that respect.
If you've ever wondered what the legal framework at the FCCPC is like by now, I'm sure you have a smile on your face because you are well informed. Keep watching Consumer Voice Television.
Thank you, Dokon. I remain officially enlightened. You know, the consumer isn't always right, but the consumer have their rights. Know your rights so you can know where and how to go about protecting them. My name is Reward Enakerapo, and until next week, this is Consumer Voice Television.
Subscribe now and step behind the scenes of Africa's next great stories. Let's make magic together.